everyone. This is the Bearded Music Teacher podcast, and this is Mr. E. And today I will be talking about the Dance Craze. But before we get into that, here is some things about the podcast just to remind all my listeners, both new and returning. This podcast is being used for educational purposes for my students. If you are not a student, you are more than welcome to continue listening to these podcasts as this information is all done through research I've done through various sources, as well as different courses I have taken, as well as interviews I have conducted and read. Any reproduction of this podcast or podcasts of this channel that are done by the Bearded Music Teacher must seek expressed consent to reproduce by written means. You can find me on Twitter, which is at MR_E_music FCS. So this episode 16, if I remember correctly, according to my notes here, is all about the dance craze. Last podcast, when we closed out that podcast, we saw that there was a dance craze that was starting with the formation of the American Bandstand TV show, made famous by Dick Clark, but was headed up by Bob Horn as the first host. Now, Dick Clark, I think a lot of my listeners that are my students do not remember his famous New Year's Eve that he would do every year. Since I was a kid, he was responsible for ushering in the new year on live television here in the United States. But let's go back to the dance craze here. So we talked about how American Bandstand started out, and the format of the American Bandstand was much like MTV's TRL in the 90s, or Total Request Live in the 90s and early 2000s, I want to say. Yes, early 2000s. So what they would do is they would mainly focus on counting down the top singles or playing the favorite songs, but instead of it like being TRL where the music and the culture would be the center, or music gossip, if you will, American Bandstand was known for the dance. They started really focusing on dances that could be taught and seen on TV, and I made a connection to the musical Hairspray as being a prime example of looking at exactly what that would be like. So the dance craze was kicked off by Chubby Checkers, his version of a Hank Bullard song called The Twist. Now that spurred off a lot of different things. The Peppermint Lounge in New York City did The Twist, prompting a hit spin-off song, Joey D's Peppermint Twist, and that was in 1962. It went to the pop charts at number 1 and 8 in the R&B charts. Then in 1961, a little bit earlier, before Joey D's Peppermint Twist, Checkers released Let's Twist Again. And if you listen to the song, what we do is we actually in the classroom, I'll typically do this, is where I will play the twist followed right up with Let's Twist Again, because he makes references to the song that he made famous with Hank Bullard's version that he covered of The Twist. So there's a commonality, a storytelling, if you will, with that. As a result of that song, Let's Twist Again, coming in 1961, The Twist had a resurgence, and it once again hit a number 1 spot for the second time in 1962, number 4 in the R&B charts. And this was a feat that hadn't been accomplished since Bing Crosby's White Christmas. If you remember early in this podcast season, I mentioned that the song White Christmas went and hit number 1 in the charts, fell out of the charts about a year or two, and then came back. And so that was what they did. And then we have these movies that really promulgated or spread the dance craze even more. Movies featuring well known musicians also played a role in building the sense of community and shared concern. Elvis, at this point, as much as a teen idol as anything else, was making family films. Frankie Avalon also was among those teen idols, and they made their jump to the movies, appearing in a series of music and dance filled teen targeted beach movies with Annette Funicello. And it's interesting to look at also, we have the Mouseketeer or the Mickey Mouse Club television show, which has spawned or spurred a lot of people's careers. One mainly is, I believe, Britney Spears was on it. There's a we also had, like, I think, Christina Aguilera. I could be wrong. I'm just going off the top of my head on this one right now, but nonetheless, it did start a lot of careers, and with that, same with Annette Funicello. And you also have Frankie Avalon, like I mentioned in the last podcast. Frankie Avalon would go on to do a lot of these movies. And it was because he was seen as a teen idol. And so we had all these different spin offs. And what we do in class, like I've said before, is we go through all this Dance Craze stuff as best we can. We look at the twist, we look at Let's Twist Again, then we look at the Peppermint Twist. We even look and explore other dance styles. We look at the evolution of dance. We watch a video on these group of guys that actually go through the evolution of dance through the decades, if you will. And we say, okay, look, see how things have changed. See where, for example, we go from the like this two-step kind of thing with and the Charleston and things like that. Now, again, I'm not an expert on dance, so if somebody is upset about that, sorry, I'm not an expert on dance at all. But we go from like the Charleston, and then we gradually go over the time, over and over and over and over through time, and then we get to, for example, the whip and Nene, where it looks very, very different from and sounds different. The music sounds drastically different from the Charleston. But we see these dance crazes that happen, and we get a chance to see throughout time these different dance crazes. But I just wanted to put a quick podcast together about that. The next podcast will entail things of the folk music. There's a huge look at folk music in general when we start to see the rock audience of the first wave of rock go to college, and they mature out of their teenage rebellious stage and become much more sophisticated in their tastes. All right, well, that wraps it up. Again, you can find me on Twitter, which is the handle at MR_E_music FCS. And again, this is the Music Teacher Podcast. I'm sorry, the Bearded Music Teacher Podcast. And thank you for listening, and thank you for rocking and rolling with me through rock history.